show today, Brother Tariq, I'm joined by a guest who's going to be talking about how the pandemic has basically created judgment and how it's impacted our emotional resilience and the way we relate to others. And are we actually emotionally ready for the new normal and the rebuilding of lost connections? So that's the topic I'm going to be talking about today. We're talking about judgment across the pandemic. Have you found yourself to be a bit judgmental, Brother Tariq, when observing maybe people across social media and what they're doing in, the places they're going, maybe in lockdown? Have you found yourself doing that a little bit?
I think sometimes when you're actually kind of like driving past maybe parks and stuff, especially in the earlier days when it was a situation where people, it was kind of like a clear lockdown and people were still out and about, and you generally look and you think, why aren't people taking more care in this? But to be honest, aside from that, I've actually been near enough locked inside. And as you know, I spent all of Ramadan and obviously a couple of weeks before that completely locked in. So I didn't actually get to see many people to make a judgment. But I think you're right. I think it is a situation where people do, of course, see people and they think to themselves, oh, why is so-and-so out and people are doing this? I think they're right to make judgments in situations where people are out on the beach and all sorts of places where they shouldn't be. But making judgment when people are shopping or maybe picking up their medication, or you don't know what difficulties people are going through. So I think as a Muslim, we should generally make 70 excuses for our brothers and sisters. And I think we should definitely employ that with this as well, and try to make as many excuses before we judge people.
And also on today's show, we're kind of identifying, emotions and monitoring how to put our emotions in check, because a lot of people with the phasing out are they actually emotionally ready for the new normal and the rebuilding of lost connections? Because people are now going to be allowed to obviously see relatives and connect and rebuild those lost connections. How are they emotionally ready to do that after seeing them maybe after a good 3 or 4 months? So these are the conversations I'm going to be having this morning with no other than emotion coach Rohail Aslam, whose research focuses entirely on judgment. Now, Rohail is a teacher and artist, published author, and emotion coaching trainer, and managing director of Act of Change CIC. Rohail delivers training and support sessions to school, staff, families, and employers in great emotional resilience when managing relationships. Rohail believes that people everywhere can learn the skills required to enhance their relationships with everyone in their lives. And he's my guest on the line, inshallah, this morning. And I believe Rohail is on the line right now. Assalamu alaikum, Rohail.
Wa alaikum assalam. Can you hear me?
I can hear you very clearly. Thank you so very much, Rohail, for joining us this morning.
Fantastic.
Tell us, where are you?
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Tell us, where are you tuning in or calling in from this morning?
From for the moment, my very quiet front room of my house. Very quiet because some of the kids are still asleep. My 11-year-old Maria has left for school, so we actually started her back at school today. She's in year 6. Yeah, she's in year 6, and she was just... And we visited the school, and, they're describing... it's really funny, because they said, yeah, when Maria comes back, we'll have her bubble ready for her.
I love it. Bubble ready.
Yeah, absolutely. Like all this new normal that we're talking about. And
yes.
We've got all these buzzwords coming in now. So Maria, at the moment, as we speak, will be in her bubble that's been created for her at school. And, fair play. It looked... I visited the school, because initially I just thought, no way, not until September. But, they're really kind of going the extra mile in the schools as well. And I think it's fantastic.
So, Rohail, do you think that people may be passing judgment on you for actually sending Maria back in year 6? Because it's been quite divided amongst parents across the country whether it's actually safe to send their children back or not.
Well, absolutely, and this is the thing, Shamiza, which is that we, judgmentalism and passing judgment on people, it's not something necessarily that started with a lockdown. It's something that's been going on since I mean, it's quite a sweeping statement to make, but it's so completely true that from the moment, Allah commanded Shaitan to prostrate in front of Adam, right? From that moment, from that judgmental response that Shaitan gave, which was to refuse to prostrate in front of Adam, because he felt that that Adam was inferior to him, and actually, being judgmental has started from that point, and actually, throughout history, judgmentalism and to pass judgment on others, it is something that hasn't decreased. It's actually increased, and as society in these last 50 or 60 years has become more complex with technology, with politics, with all of the chaos that we've seen in modern society. Well, judgmentalism has increased, but there's really something, Shamiza, that I think I've got to clarify here as well, and it's something that so often, and right the way across society, especially in the research that I'm doing at the moment, this surfaces so often, which is that people tend to sometimes get confused between the meaning of making a judgment and being judgmental. So making a judgment, I mean, during lockdown, as Brother Tariq correctly said, he said, we've got to make judgments. We've got to judge, what are those people in the park? Is that safe? Should I go here? Should I go there? Now, these are judgments that we make every day, that without these judgments, we can't survive. How much shall I eat? Well, I mean, I've certainly got that issue of how much should I eat every day? How fast should I drive? What should I wear? Now, these are judgments. These are almost like mini sort of risk assessments that we're making every day. We can't survive without these judgments. However, to be judgmental, Shamiza, is when we are, quite frankly, to put it simply, is when we're mean to each other or about each other or about something. It's when we're overly critical about something. So let's bring us back to kind of the home. Now, during lockdown, as again Brother Tariq correctly said, he's been cooped up at home with the family. And just like the rest of us, it's so easy, Shamiza, to say the wrong thing. So being judgmental, and the area of my study is actually that. It's where we are not thinking before we speak to each other when we're at home, and that's where the kickoff happens, and this is where confrontations happen.
Definitely. I mean, there's a heightened level of anxiety and uncertainty, not really fully understanding what's going on around us, around the world.
Of course.
This makes us a lot more hypersensitive, and this is where we're on overdrive, we're overthinking. So I'm really delighted that you're actually joining us on the show today, because you've just given us an example of you sending your daughter back to school. Obviously, there's going to be people that are going to be judging you for that decision, but you've actually done your risk assessment. You've judged what was best for you and what was best for your family. As an emotion coach, how were you able to emotionally engage your daughter to make this decision? Because she must have been quite anxious as well, as whether this is going to be safe, but she's actually following your guidelines, your judgment, to make that decision for her.
Well, that's a wonderful example, Shamiza, and it's a great question, because Maria was actually, she's the youngest of my four kids, and so understandably she had the highest level of anxiety, about when we should go back, Dad, what's going to happen. And it was really wonderful to visit the school with her, so that not only her, but I saw it as well. And I saw that they were really taking sort of measures in keeping sort of children separated, having that physical distance, having lots and lots of these gels to rub on their hands, and, kind of really going the extra mile. And so we both saw that. So immediately both of our anxiety levels came down. But when we came back, it was again, it was a case of me sort of talking to Maria, but saying that, connecting with Maria first and saying, so this is how you were feeling, Maria, and I could completely understand it because I was in the same boat. I was feeling this as well. But how are you feeling now that we've seen the school? Now, as an emotion coach, Shamiza, this is actually how you deal with anybody that's kind of in a problem, anybody that looks like they need help, support. What you do is you actually show them that you're kind of understanding, or you're trying to understand their world first. And as soon as that connection happens, well, then they're ready to problem solve. And this is what's beautiful, you see, and about following a kind of an emotion coaching strategy. And this, Shamiza, when as a parent or as a husband or as a friend, a neighbour, a cousin, an employer, when you do this regularly enough and you try and connect with somebody first before then problem solving, suddenly, Shamiza, the world becomes a completely different place. Suddenly you start to feel calmer because there's no kickoff. And suddenly the response that you get from people around you, suddenly that's calmer. It's kind of, and it's Islam. This is Islam. Islam is love and patience and empathy and connecting.
So it's the key thing here is communicate, express what you're wanting to say, but in a certain manner where you're
absolutely, Shamiza. But really, the crux of it, and where my real focus is that you can only get to a place where you are following the kind of wisdom of emotion coaching when you start to hold yourself back from being judgmental. So, an example being, you could be at home, one of your children might say something rude to you or to one of their siblings in front of you. Now, you've got the choice here, Shamiza, of either you feel angry, so you've either got the choice of actually blurting out your anger to your child and saying, "Oi, Batamiz, why did you do that? Yeah, that's so rude." So you've got the choice. You can either do that and cause an argument, yeah, or at the very least, make your child feel, "Oh, I'm in a bad place. I was angry, and on top of that, Mum's just told me off." Or you've got the choice, Shamiza, of stepping back, stopping yourself from doing that, and thinking to yourself, well, I can now speak to my child in a calm way, in the way that I would want my child to speak, and I can connect with my child, and now I can actually teach them something. And, it's all in us restraining ourselves. It's all in us holding ourselves back. And during lockdown, that ain't happening. Right now, we've got families who are they're cooped up like chickens in a a chicken house, and they're all so often confronting each other. They're not thinking before they're speaking. Again, not just the Muslim community; it's global, and the cases of domestic violence, domestic abuse, even murder have gone up exponentially since the start of the lockdown.
We have seen many families bonding, but many families also breaking up, and this is the unfortunate aftermath of the lockdown, where we've seen positivity, people embracing family life, but we've also heard some really, really sad stories of death and domestic violence, and it's really, really, really awful cases. So it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show this morning, Rohail. Folks, if you've just joined the show, I am joined by no other than Rohail Aslam. It is 18 minutes past 10, the 1st of July, and it's the Urban Cube brought to you on Inspire FM on this very mild Wednesday morning. I'm doing the conversation for the show in the warmth of my living room. And Rohail, are you joining us from Dudley this morning? Where are you joining us from this morning?
Absolutely, Shamiza. I'm at home. I'm in the front room. It's still very quiet. The kids are still asleep, and I've got my cup of tea.
Wonderful.
And And I'm just really pleased to be here, really, and to be speaking to you and speaking to all the listeners. It's what we're sharing is so critical to all of our community. It really is.
Definitely, and I'm really pleased that you're joining us this morning. And the topic of the show is: have we become more judgmental in the pandemic? Has it impacted our emotional resilience and the way we relate to others? And are we emotionally ready for the new normal and the rebuilding of lost connections? And I'm joined by no other than emotion coach Rohail Aslam, whose research actually focuses on judgment, believe it or not, folks. Now, Rohail is a teacher, an artist, and a published author, and an emotion coaching trainer and managing director of Actor Change CIC. So he's a perfect guest to join us, because on Saturday we will see further easing of the lockdown. We'll be seeing people now going to restaurants and freely being able to go to various other non-essential shops, travelling and connecting with families and friends, hopefully in bubbles. But this also raises the question on whether they are going to be judging the way they do that appropriately, and actually taking in the risk assessments that we talked about earlier on with Brother Rohail. And are we emotionally ready to kind of phase ourselves out? So it's great to have Rohail to talk to us a little bit more about that. Now, Rohail, Saturday, July the 4th, how are you feeling about that? Are you emotionally ready? Some people have called it Super Saturday. Other people have kind of felt a little bit anxious and just wish it's not happening, especially in relation to Leicester's lockdown.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm quite excited about it. However, Shamiza, I don't necessarily think, a little bit like Brother Tariq, that there's a great deal of difference in perhaps sort of whatever's floating around in the air now compared to what's going to be floating around in the air on Saturday. And if any, I think globally, I think we just run the risk of getting ahead of ourselves and perhaps kind of, I just think as a society we need to be very careful, physically and emotionally, about how the fact that the last 3 or 4 months we've kind of socially we've been kind of isolated from each other, and this is, we're even talking about immediate family, and just the fact though that we can kind of remix and we can get together again, I think is going to be, socially it's going to be a really powerful time, and emotionally it's going to be an extremely powerful time as well. But
it's intense in the sense that there's going to be families who've not been able to grieve.
Absolutely.
Because of lost ones.
100%. I mean, if we just talk about that for a moment of sort of grief and losing loved ones, that emotional roller coaster all by itself is something that people are going to have to deal with alongside seeing each other and seeing wider extended families again after so many months. Shamiza, this is completely uncharted territory for all of us. We haven't seen this kind of isolation from each other since the war, and this is why, I mean, even for somebody that studies emotion and behaviour and supports families, and I see how people conflict with each other. Even for me, it's almost like kind of uncharted territory for me as well. It's not easy to imagine what kind of responses and how people are going to feel and respond about each other. But from what we know of experience, Shamiza, when you're emotionally charged, then you can either that's when we're sort of that's when our impulses come into play, where we can become more impulsive. So when you've not seen somebody for many months, and perhaps before the isolation you had some sort of politics with this person or with this family, well then when you see them again after so long, that can either go one way or the other. Yeah. So you can either sort of click and sort of hit the ground running with them again and get on with them, or baggage from the past can come out and so easily blow up in your face again. And again, we've got to be measured, not just physically. We've got to be careful, and we've got to be measured emotionally to get back to normal as well.
We have about a minute left to the break, and Brother Rohail, we have 2 questions for you, so I'm hoping you'll be able to answer this after the break. Firstly, how do we control our anger? And the second is, you sound so calm. How?
Okay. You know what? I think I'm one of those. I think the reason why I'm in this line of work, Shamiza, is because I think even when I'm not calm, I manage to sound calm.
It's a good technique, good thing to have.
Well, no, again, I think I'm just really, really lucky. I don't think it's anything that I've crafted and really shaped myself. Thankfully, I can generally stay calm, but again, I think it's partly from working for years and years with families and children that are behaviour and emotionally they're pretty much a train wreck. Children in schools, in these special schools where they've been excluded from school, their behaviour is extremely volatile, Shamiza. And when you work with them every day, you slowly, gradually learn to step back, because you have to. If you don't learn how to step back and kind of detach yourself from their behaviour and have a kind of a professional response to them, well, then you can never work in a place like that. And I think that's really helpful.
And we are now needing to step back because we're heading to a break. 100%. And after the break, we're going to be joining with Brother
This programme will continue after the break. Continue listening to Inspire FM. Inspire FM. Inspire 105.1 FM.
Now, we had a question from our listener asking, how do you remain so calm? And how do we keep our anger in check, especially when we're surrounded by people who get on our nerves and they're in our faces 24 hours?
Well, Shamiza, the thing is, right, be under no illusion at all, and I'm saying this to you and to the listener that's asked the question. We are all fallible, right? I mean, clearly, I'm giving a radio interview here, so I'm not exactly going to misbehave, am I? I'm going to be on my best behaviour, and just like any human being, I am fallible. We can all lose our tempers, Shamiza, and although a person might sound calm, we can all have our moments when anger takes centre stage and we put our anger first, and then that's exactly what comes out of our mouth or with our hands and our gestures, or even the way we look at somebody or something. And this is the reason why we have any kind of conflict in the world. So, please be under no illusion. You're not listening to Rohail Aslam, who's 24/7 cool as a cucumber and never loses his temper. The only difference is that because I'm in this line of work, whenever I do lose my temper, I catch myself, I feel like a fool, and then I try and put it right immediately.
Right.
Yeah.
So what are the techniques then that we could apply in a situation that's actually testing our nerves? Because I'm sure everybody can relate to this. Nerves are tested now between parents and their children, between husband and wife, between brother and sister, when we're in our homes.
No, exactly, absolutely. And this is what the part that I love really about sort of sharing practical examples of what it is that we're trying to teach people and families. So let's take a really common example of of a situation at home that would so often sort of end up in an argument. And as you said, Shamiza, it could be between man and wife. It could be between brother and sister, or parent and child. Let's take, for example, a brother and sister there arguing, maybe over a toy at home, and the parent, maybe you're the mum, and you can hear them, and you hear what's going on, and they end up getting really upset with each other, and one of them ends up sort of coming to your daughter or your son, and you say to them, you know, and again, we talked about this in the first half of the interview, which was, if you're going to help somebody to problem solve, or if you're going to, if you're angry with somebody or a child, the best way to deal with it first is to connect with them. And you do that by actually trying to see their world first, trying to understand their situation and how they're feeling first. And the reason why I say that, Shamiza, is because we're human beings. Whether you're an adult or a child, if somebody is not going to connect with you first, then they're not going to get anything out of you. So let's go back to the two children that have been fighting. The daughter's upset, she's sat on the sofa, and you might even know that maybe she's the one in the wrong. Even if she's the one in the wrong, Shamiza, you're still going to go to her, and you're going to say, are you okay? I mean, let's say her name is Fatima. Fatima, are you okay? You look a bit upset. You look like, you know, you need to talk about this, and you know, I'm here. What's happened? Do you want to share it with me? And Fatima might share it with you, and if you've done it properly and sincerely, chances are she probably will tell you what's happened. And as soon as she tells you what's happened, the first thing that we want to do is to connect with her, is to prove to her that we know how she feels. And you do that by helping her label her feelings. So you'd say, oh, Fatima, well, that must have made you feel really angry and frustrated and maybe left out. And that must have hurt as well, you know, if your brother hit you or pushed you. And immediately Fatima starts to nod her head. She starts to connect with you. And then you show Fatima some empathy. And you say, you know what, Fatima, I remember when this happened to me as well. And I felt like this and I felt like that. And then you can even say to Fatima that, you know, and when it happened to me, I tried to do this and I tried to do that. And this is how I solved my problem. So by this time, Fatima is nodding her head at you. She's connecting with you. She's believing that you understand her. And this is where you can then problem solve with Fatima. So then you can say, well, Fatima, you know, when you said that you then pushed your brother, can I just ask you then, so we've talked about how you felt, so how do you think your brother felt? Yeah? And then Fatima's probably going to say, oh yeah, it probably hurt him, or that probably made him angry. And that's when we problem solve. At that point then you can say, well, Fatima, look, this is what happened, so you did this and your brother did that. So now let's work together. How do you think we can put it right now? What do you think we can do next? So what we're doing here, Shamiza, is we're not giving them the answer on the plate. What we're doing is we're actually guiding them towards coming up with the answer themselves. That way, they don't feel like we've been judgmental. We haven't judged them ourselves. We've actually helped them to problem solve. And this is what the theory of emotion coaching proves, which is if you do this as a family with each other again and again and again, eventually your children learn to problem solve independently. Now that is emotional intelligence. So your children become emotionally intelligent.
And this is such a key skill for them, not just in the home, but also in the wider world and in school and in the working environment when they get older. And it's a skill they can take and build on. But it has to start somewhere. And,
so much so, yeah. And Shamiza, you know, the home is the first school. The home is the first school for a child.
And it has been, homeschooling has been a real issue for many people in the last 3 months, and it has really made or broken the way we're communicating with our children, and
yes,
and it's really valuable, the skill that you've actually addressed here, because children are struggling with anxiety. They've got all these questions going off in their heads. Their emotions are all over the place, and they turn to the parents to kind of guide them. And if we're not communicating with them, there's a lot of internal trauma that can possibly build. So when they are ready to go out in the world, how are they going to face the world? This is my concern.
Yes, absolutely.
So what advice would you give to parents who are new to this? And where could they get further information in building these techniques of emotional coaching? Do you have a website?
We do indeed, Shamiza, yes. I mean, the website is Act of Change, CIC.co.uk. So shall I spell that?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so it's ACTOV, change, that's CHANGE, CIC.co.uk. And on the website, Shamiza, we've got videos, we've got a whiteboard animation as well, that actually guides parents through, and we've actually done it in sort of plain English as well. So, even if there are parents that struggle with understanding English, it guides them through not only why we need to think about our emotions, but also it talks about the science of emotions as well, Shamiza, because so many of us don't actually understand. We've got no idea of how directly our emotions affect our physical health. Most of us don't know that there's actually a nerve called the vagus nerve that goes from our brain, and it connects to all of our internal organs. Now, the vagus nerve only does its job properly when we're happy, relaxed, healthy, showing love and empathy to each other. That's when it's working properly, and that's when it's regulating our body properly. However, when we're in confrontations, we're fighting or arguing with each other, when we're feeling anxious or worried or depressed, well, the vagus nerve stops doing its job properly. And this is why, Shamiza, when we're stressed, we get ill. People get migraines. I get mouth ulcers when I'm stressed. So
wow.
So that's kind of the correlation. That's the connection between, and that's how directly our brain and our emotions and our emotional well-being, our health, is affecting our bodies. And we've got to wake up to it. As a human race, and especially as parents, we've got to start to learn more about it.
I want to ask you another question. Another listener has sent us a message. Now, we've spoken about how to communicate with our children to develop their emotional intelligence once they're in conflict with their siblings. But another issue that the pandemic has really affected is the extended families. And it's affected families quite badly in the sense that I've had somebody just message saying they have an elderly mother and she's become more aggressive and angry because her routine has been messed up. Our tolerance levels are so low as we have too much time to think. Even myself, I feel my patience is low as I have kids who are going stir crazy and an added pressure of stress financially and uncertainty of the future. So how could we advise this wonderful listener who's so kindly messaged us, and may Allah ease her struggles?
How
can she relate to her elderly mother struggling at the moment?
Absolutely, completely, and isn't it completely natural for everybody to be struggling during a time where our practical lives have been impacted so greatly, haven't they? But then, what the other factor is the fact that this listener is dealing with somebody who's elderly, and when we're elderly, we become frail. We become more frail and fragile and vulnerable, not just physically but emotionally and mentally as well. So, surely it's all based on common sense, isn't it? That the more resilient amongst us, the ones amongst us who are stronger emotionally, well, with greater power, and with greater sort of emotional resilience, well, comes greater responsibility. And for want of sounding harsh to anybody at all, it's down to the ones that are more emotionally resilient and stable and healthy to be empathetic, to show more empathy, to show more patience to those that are more vulnerable, to those that have more issues with regulating themselves, keeping themselves calm, not panicking, and all that I can say again to the listener and to anybody is that we've got to, each of us individually, have to take responsibility for all of those that we live with, all of those in our extended family, and even, in especially the elderly, because the elderly, again, they're reeling from this. I've got a very elderly mother-in-law who lives just locally to me, and she is, she's self-isolated completely, and come on, who doesn't fear for their life? And and it's because she doesn't want to go out. She's fearful. She's paranoid, and again, that sort of impacts on how she speaks to all of us and how she speaks to her grandchildren. And again, if our response isn't a patient and empathetic response, if we can't put ourselves in her shoes and try to feel and understand her world, then quite frankly, this is the recipe then for disaster, and this is where conflict will come from. So again, it's just stepping back, and it's having empathy for your elderly parents and grandparents. There's nothing more we can do.
Thank you so very much for that message, Rohail. I hope that there is some support for you, because I think talking is a key thing, isn't it? It's being able to talk to somebody, to be able to share what you're feeling, to actually voice out your concerns and your anxiety. Is that a good way of helping that emotional well-being?
Absolutely, of course it is. It's at the end of the day, Shamiza, it really is all about stepping back. It's all about sort of stopping yourself and stopping your impulses. When we feel anxious or angry or threatened in any way, shape or form, we lash out, whether that's verbally or physically. And the other thing that we need to really sort of stop to focus on, and the other cause of this, is our ego. Human beings, when our ego becomes, again, it comes under threat, then all that we want to do is to protect that and conserve that. And the other part of my research, Shamiza, is to do with why. What are the reasons why we're judgmental as human beings? And one of the main reasons why is that for some reason, and again, this is from Shaitan, which is that we all seem to want to be the ones in the right. Yeah, we get something out of proving the other wrong. When we're in, I'll give you the it's quite a funny example, but it's actually real, right? I love cooking. I could be in the kitchen, I could be cooking something, and I might be alone in the kitchen. And when I'm alone in the kitchen, I'm cooking, I'm in my own world, I'm just enjoying it so much. Right. As soon as the main head chef, i.e. my wife, walks into the kitchen and she comes up behind me, instantly I'll start making mistakes, because all I'm thinking is she's going to point something out that I've done wrong. Right.
I've been there.
And instantly, right, I'm going to become defensive. So as soon as she goes, those onions look very dark, you caramelize those onions very well. So instantly I'm going to kind of look at her with a stern look and say, well, what do you mean? And this is the point that I'm making. Just from the tiniest little remark, sentence, gesture that's aimed at proving the other wrong and making yourself kind of, in the right and higher than the other person, well, that is exactly what causes argument, confrontation, and this is exactly what I mean by judgmental. And we all do it, do we not?
Yes, we do. And how do we become better listeners then and stay calm? Because that's another question that was asked. The majority of the problems are because people cannot control their anger. So they're interested in knowing how you can become a better listener and a more calmer person.
Yeah, Shamiza, there are so many things that we can do, and there are so many things that sort of experts guide us in doing, like exercise, daily exercise, and things like even meditation. And one of the best forms of meditation for a Muslim is namaz, is salah, is prayer. Because when we're praying and we're focused on namaz, we're meditating. It's a form of meditation. Now, regular meditation, whether you're a Muslim or a non-Muslim, has proven, and will always prove, to be something that actually keeps you calm, and it teaches you to be calm. In the same way, daily exercise, doing exercise every day that sort of gets you out of breath, is something, again, that sends those essential endorphins to the brain, and it keeps you calm, relaxed, happy, content, positive. But then, alongside all of these sort of exercises and activities that we should be doing, it's about our intention, Shamiza. If we want peace and tranquility in our homes and amongst our friends and in our workplaces badly enough, then we will make the intention to actively try to keep calm. And so we'll actually look for those situations, Shamiza, where we would usually kick off, where we'd usually say the wrong thing, and we're going to say to ourselves, right, the next time I have a situation like that, I'm not going to respond in that typical way. I'm going to step back and I'm going to try a different approach. So it's all about intention. And that's it. That's how we start. And you start with small steps. And, you build your capacity. You become a more powerful person.
So becoming a powerful person, building yourselves with small steps, is also including a positive mindset. So if you begin with a positive mindset, it just keeps that energy flowing, that positive energy. I wanted to go back to Sister Rahana's message about how her elderly mother is becoming more aggressive and angry because her routine is messed up. This kind of impacts the rest of the family. It seems that Sister Rahana is in charge of the family. It seems it's an extended family. Yeah. So would you say that her mum, maybe for Rahana, her children, mum, they might need to go outdoors a little bit more, just go out a little bit more, be in a different space, exercise, and that could be quite helpful to kind of break the routine, because it is about breaking and adapting to new routines for a healthy mindset. But I wanted to tap onto the word sabr. For many women, we've always been told to have sabr in the home, sabr with our children, and when everything's too taxing, then, hold your tongue and have sabr. Have sabr. This thing called have sabr puts a lot of pressure on a lot of people to remain quiet, and you'd be rewarded to have sabr. But if you don't have sabr, then you're judged as a woman as well. So what's your thoughts on that? We've got about 3 minutes to get the show.
Well, we live, whether we like it or not, we live in a patriarchal world, don't we? And the fact is that pressures on women, not only in the Muslim community, in the Muslim world, but even in the non-Muslim world, pressures on women have always been there and ever present, haven't they? But this is why, Shamiza, so many women then decide to rise above that, and they decide to change their own sort of, they decide to change their world. And the way they do that, Shamiza, is by always sticking to the notion of lifelong learning. And this is something, this is a massive gap in everything in our Muslim community, which is that we seem, in the Muslim community, we seem to sort of all grow up, get married, get jobs, and we all then seem to decide that we don't need to sort of continue learning, and we decide that we know how to run a family, we know how to do this, we know how to do that, and we then stop learning. And Shamiza, Allah's given us a brain and a heart and an intention for a good reason, and that is to continue learning and developing and growing. So this isn't just about women. This is about all of us. This is about husbands, and I'd go as far as saying that it's actually more important for the men of the house, the husbands of the house, to take more responsibility for this idea that they are, if we are living in a patriarchal world, well, you know what, the onus is more on them to actually guide their family, to encourage their women and their wives and their daughters and their sisters to almost join them. This has got to be a whole team effort. This idea that the onus is more on, say, the woman in a family, this has to change, Shamiza, completely.
And hopefully it might influence change from the show. Brother Rohail, it's been such a pleasure having you join us. We are now 30 seconds to the end of the show. Please quickly tell us what your handles are for people to connect, and then it'll be a good... And I just want to say thank you for joining us.
Okay.
30 seconds.
Thank you very much. So you can get us on Facebook. So that's, if you put in Act of Change, CIC, you'll find us on Facebook. We're on Instagram as well, which is, again, it's Act of Change, CIC, and on YouTube as well. You can find us.
Brilliant. Thank you so very much.